They thought they were targeting just another soul. But what they didn't realize was that the one they tried to break was carrying the blueprint of heaven. Welcome to Chosen One's Sanctuary. This message isn't for the masses. It's for those who were attacked before they were even revealed. For those who were misjudged, discarded, betrayed, not because they were weak, but because they were chosen. From the very beginning, those with divine assignments have always been misunderstood. Joseph's own brothers threw him in a pit. David's own father didn't call his name. And Christ himself was rejected by the very people he came to redeem. So if you've been targeted, overlooked, or betrayed, what if it's not a curse? What if it's confirmation? They didn't just come after your peace. They came after your purpose. They didn't just spread rumors. They triggered revelation. And by trying to destroy you, they accidentally revealed who you really are. In the next few minutes, we're going to uncover why their attacks were never random, why your pain has prophetic meaning, and how every attempt to bring you down only pulled back the veil on something far more dangerous than they expected: your divine identity. Stay with me until the end, because by the time we finish this message, you'll see clearly that they didn't just aim at you. They aimed at the throne behind you, and heaven noticed. Now let's begin. The trap of misjudging the chosen. They didn't see it coming. Not because you were hiding, but because heaven had concealed you. There is a difference. What they mistook as weakness was divine strategy. What they saw as insignificance was God keeping his promise, hidden in plain sight. This is the pattern of the sacred. The most powerful vessels are always the ones least expected. David was left in the field while his brothers paraded before the prophet. Joseph was thrown into a pit by those who couldn't recognize the dreamer as their future deliverer. You too were passed over, misjudged, labeled, but not because you lacked value. You were veiled by design. God often cloaks greatness in common packaging, because the chosen are not revealed through noise, but through obedience. You moved in silence while they moved in schemes. And because they couldn't categorize you, they underestimated you. That's where they made their first mistake. They thought they were dealing with someone average. But chosen doesn't look like power. It looks like process. It looks like the one who was broken, overlooked, and still got back up. Your silence was never weakness. It was wisdom. And while they ran their mouths, heaven was writing your scroll. They judged you from the outside, but your assignment was encoded in your spirit. And the moment they tried to strike, they struck not just flesh, but prophecy. Every insult, every betrayal, every false accusation, they thought it would crush you. But they forgot the foundation you stand on is not built by man. It was carved into your identity before you took your first breath. The world sees garments, but God sees glory. And what they couldn't recognize in you will be the very thing they'll one day have to answer to. Because the moment they misjudged you, they gave away their position and exposed your rising. But misjudging the chosen is more than a human error. It violates the spiritual structure of protection heaven places around those sent with divine purpose. And when that sacred hedge is breached, the consequences ripple far beyond what the eye can see. The spiritual laws they violated. There is a divine order, an invisible structure, ancient and immutable. And when someone is marked by heaven, that order surrounds them like a wall of fire. Not always visible, but always active. Psalm 105 makes it clear, "Touch not mine anointed, and do my prophets no harm." This is not a poetic phrase, it is law. When they came after you, they weren't just targeting a person. They crossed into territory sealed by covenant. They didn't know, or maybe they didn't care. But ignorance does not excuse violation. They broke a line they were never meant to approach, and heaven responded in kind. There's a reason Pharaoh drowned chasing Moses, a reason Saul lost his crown pursuing David, a reason Jezebel was devoured after hunting down Elijah. The moment you target the anointed, you declare war not just on a person, but on the God who sent them. And that war never ends well. They lied on your name, schemed behind closed doors, turned people against you. But each act was a spiritual transaction. And in the courts of heaven, those debts always come due. That's why they're restless now. That's why their plans keep crumbling. It's not just karma, it's divine consequence. They tried to curse what God has already blessed. And the moment they did, they triggered a law older than creation. Whatever you send toward the sacred returns multiplied. Not because you wish them harm, but because divine justice is not optional. It's inevitable. This is why the attacks on chosen ones never land the way the enemy expects. Because what was aimed to break you becomes the very weapon heaven uses to build you. And what they launched in darkness will be judged in the light. They violated the law. But what they didn't realize is that the law wasn't there to protect you from them. It was there to protect them from you. And now, as judgment circles back, the fire they tried to ignite under your feet is the very flame they can no longer outrun. Why the attacks were so precise? They didn't stumble into your life by accident. The timing, the tactics, the pressure, it was too exact to be coincidence. The attacks were calculated, spiritually engineered to exploit your most vulnerable spaces. They targeted the softness of your heart, the depth of your empathy, the silence of your battles. And yet, in all their effort, they misunderstood one thing. Every time they aimed, they revealed how spiritually threatened they were by your presence. Chosen ones don't attract chaos by being chaotic. They attract chaos by carrying clarity. You carried a light that unsettled every spirit still hiding in darkness. Your joy exposed their resentment. Your peace made their dysfunction louder. Your refusal to conform triggered their need to control. You didn't even need to speak. Your existence alone mirrored everything they were running from. It was never really personal. It was spiritual. The moment your anointing began to rise, their inner torment rose with it. That's why they fixated on you. That's why they studied your movements. They weren't trying to learn you. They were trying to dismantle what they didn't understand. But what they couldn't comprehend, they couldn't conquer. Like Herod hearing rumors of a baby born in Bethlehem, they saw something emerging in you that terrified them. Not because of where you were, but because of where you were headed. And so they launched attack after attack, hoping to cut off what hadn't even bloomed yet. But prophecy cannot be assassinated. They sent doubt to paralyze you. They sent betrayal to isolate you. They sent shame to drown your voice. But every dart they threw became a map, pointing to what was most powerful inside of you. And that's the irony. The precision of their attacks only confirmed the exact areas heaven is planning to use for glory. When the attacks are that specific, you can be sure. What they fear most is the version of you that's waking up, the alchemy of divine reversal. They wanted to see you fall. But heaven had another plan. because every time they threw pain your way, you transformed it. Every cut became a carving. Every wound became a well. You are the divine alchemist, turning every bitter thing into holy fire. This isn't just resilience, it's transmutation. God has always worked like this. What was meant for evil, he bends into good. Joseph didn't just survive the betrayal of his brothers. He used it as the road to Egypt, the very place where his dream would be fulfilled. His dungeon became a doorway. His chains became keys. You did the same. They sent you shame. You built identity. They sent you loneliness. You found God. They sent you silence. You heard heaven louder. You turned mourning into fuel and rejection into remembrance. This is what makes chosen ones so threatening. The enemy cannot win because every attack becomes material for your elevation. And it's not that the pain didn't hurt. It did. But something in you knew that every tear was a seed, every disappointment, a pruning. You didn't run from the fire. You let it refine you. You let it break you open so that what was eternal could finally flow through. Now look, the very things that were meant to bury you became the ground beneath your rising. And those who threw dirt on your name are stunned, because instead of fading, you blossomed. They never expected that the more they pressed you down, the higher you would rise. But that's what happens when you are chosen. Your ashes don't signal the end. They mark the beginning of your rebirth. And the fire they used to try to consume you, it only made the gold shine clearer. The ripple effect of their attacks. They thought their actions would remain contained, that the words they whispered, the lies they planted, the damage they schemed would only touch you. But when someone targets a chosen one, they don't just unleash destruction in one direction. They unleash a ripple. A wave that begins quietly, but spreads with consequences they never considered. Those who joined in, who laughed behind screens, who nodded in agreement, who stayed silent when they knew the truth, are now beginning to feel the shift. The energy they fed is returning to them. The same confusion they sowed into your life is now unraveling their own. The instability they tried to create around you is showing up in their relationships, their plans, their peace. What they once controlled is slipping through their fingers. This isn't karma, it's spiritual accountability. When you touch what's consecrated, even indirectly, you call judgment upon your own house. The story of Korah in the book of Numbers is a warning. He didn't just rise against Moses, he rose against the authority God placed. And the ground itself responded. What was meant to be a private rebellion became a public collapse. So now, the cracks are forming. The people who once stood with your accusers are stepping back. They see the patterns. They sense the misalignment, and one by one, their alliances are breaking. Because no one wants to stay on a ship when they realize the storm isn't outside. It's coming from within. And you remain steady, untouched. Not because you fought back, but because you were never built on the same foundation. While they scramble in the chaos they unleashed, you walk forward in a stillness that cannot be imitated. The war they started has become their inheritance. The peace you carry is your vindication. And that's the mystery they never understood. That trying to destroy you would destroy their own disguise. And now, they stand exposed, not by your retaliation, but by the echo of their own intent. The hidden legion that protected you. You shouldn't have made it out. Not with the amount of pressure they applied, not with the traps, the rumors, the moments where even your own mind started to turn against you. But somehow, you didn't just survive. You stayed intact, not by force, by covering. What they couldn't see was the army around you. Because protection for a chosen one doesn't always look like escape. It looks like preservation in the midst of fire. Just like Elisha's servant, who saw only the enemy's chariots until his eyes were opened. There have been more with you than against you this entire time. Some battles you didn't even know happened. Nights where you felt an unexplainable heaviness. Conversations that were canceled at the last minute. Attacks that should have landed but never reached you. That wasn't luck. That was heaven's intervention. A shield of presence, a wall of fire, angels stationed by command, not by request. You were never unguarded, even when you felt abandoned, even when the silence screamed, even when the betrayal cut deeper than words. The reason it didn't break you was because something greater was standing behind you, beside you, and within you. And here's the truth that humbles even the strongest among the chosen. It was never our strength. It was always His hand. The bloodline of faith that covered us. The prayers of ancestors we've never met. The covenant that speaks even when we fall silent. They tried to harm you, but every attempt had to pass through the gates of glory first. And what couldn't pass through purity was stopped by power. So now you walk, not arrogant, not invincible, but protected, carried, chosen. And every time you step forward, heaven steps with you. Because those who walk under divine assignment never walk alone. Your trials unlocked your true identity. Before the fire, you doubted who you were. You questioned your value, your voice, your vision. But it was in the heat of affliction that the truth began to surface. Not the truth they told you, not the version they tried to assign you, but the truth heaven wrote about you before time began. The pressure didn't break you, it birthed you. There are things inside the chosen that only emerge in suffering, strengths that stay buried until the soil of your comfort is shattered. That's why you couldn't skip the betrayal. That's why the rejection had to feel final. Because without it, the fire inside of you would have stayed dormant. You would have never met the version of you that stands on the other side of the breaking. Moses didn't realize he was a deliverer until he was driven from the palace. Esther didn't know she was born for such a time until the threat arrived. Jesus didn't reveal his full authority until after the wilderness. This is the pattern of heaven. Your trials are not punishments, they are portals. And when you walk through them, you come out knowing exactly who you are. You've been called many things. Too much, too emotional, too intense. But now, with everything stripped away, you see clearly. You're not too much. You were just surrounded by people who didn't have the capacity to hold divine oil. You weren't hard to love. You were hard to manipulate. And they couldn't control what heaven crowned. That season of breaking was not a detour. It was your divine unveiling. It showed you that you are not the abandoned one. You are the appointed one. You are not the fragile one. You are the refined one. And every scar they left behind is now a seal. A mark that says, you've been through the fire, and what was temporary burned away, but what is eternal still stands. Their attacks activated the assignment. They thought they were stopping you, but in striking, they awakened you. They stirred the very thing they hoped would stay silent. Because there's something about being pushed to your limit that activates divine memory. The moment they attacked, something ancient stirred in your spirit. Not rage, not revenge, revelation. That pain didn't just shake you, it shook heaven. It sent signals through the spiritual realm. And what was lying dormant, the gifts, the wisdom, the discernment, the authority, began to rise. Like dry bones rattling back to life, like flames igniting after years of cold silence. The very attack they launched became the trumpet that announced your emergence. Jonah had to be swallowed before he obeyed the call. Paul had to be blinded before he could truly see. And you had to be pressed, misunderstood, and abandoned before your assignment could fully take root. Because comfort doesn't call the chosen, it quiets them. But adversity, it activates them. You didn't choose this moment. It chose you. And once it did, nothing could keep you hidden. Not the lies, not the shame, not the fear. Because once a chosen one wakes up, there's no going back to sleep. The old distractions no longer hold power. The old attachments no longer fit. Your spirit has outgrown what once contained you. And now, you walk differently. Not with arrogance, but with awareness. You know who you are. You know why the attacks came. And you know that every hit only served one purpose: to push you into the very mission they were afraid you'd fulfill. They didn't realize it, but in trying to destroy you, they delivered you. What they were really fighting. It wasn't your attitude that bothered them. It wasn't your choices, your lifestyle, or even your silence. It was your light, the undeniable radiance of something otherworldly wrapped in your skin. A light that didn't ask for attention, but exposed everything that was counterfeit around it. What they were really fighting was the evidence of your calling. You see, darkness always detects destiny before the crowd does. Long before your gifts were visible, your presence was already causing discomfort. You hadn't said a word, but something about you disrupted the atmosphere. You hadn't revealed your vision, but it was already threatening to those who depended on shadows to maintain control. What they fought was not your voice, it was your vibration. The enemy doesn't waste energy. He doesn't attack where there's nothing to gain. He doesn't monitor those who pose no threat. You were targeted not because of what you did, but because of what you carry. And those spiritual forces, operating through people, institutions, even relationships, rose against you in coordinated patterns, hoping you would question your worth before you ever stepped into your power. That's the deception. They made it seem like you were the issue, like you were too sensitive, too different, too much. But in reality, your very existence was revealing everything that was misaligned in theirs. Your clarity confronted their confusion. Your purity exposed their corruption. Your destiny unsettled their dysfunction. The truth is, what they hated most was how untouchable your soul remained. Even when everything else was under attack, you didn't become bitter. You didn't fold. You didn't turn into what they tried to project onto you. That's how they knew. This wasn't just inner strength. This was divine protection. This was chosen blood. And that's what terrifies the enemy most. Not that you survived, but that you remembered who you are while surviving. You were never their real opponent. Their battle was always with the reflection of themselves they couldn't escape every time you walked into the room. The judgment has already begun. They thought they got away with it, that because heaven was silent, heaven was indifferent. But silence is not absence, and delay is not denial. What they failed to understand is that judgment for the chosen is not always announced. It unfolds, quietly, precisely, irrevocably. It starts when the favor they manipulated begins to dry up, when the alliances they built on lies begin to turn against them, when their name, once spoken with confidence, begins to taste uncertain in the mouths of others. The judgment isn't always thunder. It's erosion. A slow unraveling of everything they built on a false foundation. Saul still wore the crown for years after God had rejected him. But the oil had already moved. And when the oil leaves, collapse is only a matter of time. That's where they are now, still appearing powerful, still pretending to lead. But the spiritual infrastructure has already crumbled, and they feel it. That weight in their chest, that confusion they can't name, that loss of control they can't explain. It's the echo of divine justice. And you didn't lift a finger. You didn't retaliate, because the chosen don't need to curse their enemies. Their obedience alone becomes a courtroom. Every time you chose peace instead of vengeance, every time you spoke truth instead of gossip, every time you cried out in silence instead of lashing out in anger, you built an altar, and heaven heard. The judgment they now face isn't your revenge. It's their harvest. They planted it. They watered it. Now they must eat the fruit. And it tastes bitter, not because of you, but because righteousness will never allow injustice to go unchecked. This is the holy recompense, not your destruction, but their unraveling. Not because you wished it, but because they insisted on it. And now, what they meant to bury you with has become the shovel by which they dig their own pit. And the only sound left is the stillness of heaven's verdict, falling like a whisper that cannot be undone. Spiritual warfare or spiritual suicide. There is a line in the spirit realm, a sacred boundary drawn around those who have been set apart by the Most High. To touch a chosen one without divine permission is not just rebellion, it is recklessness. And yet they stepped over that line as if it were nothing. They launched attacks, spoke curses, manipulated environments, and believed they could go untouched. But what they didn't realize is that when you war against a divine assignment, you do not just declare battle, you sign a sentence. They weren't just throwing words, they were invoking consequence. Because when a person tries to destroy what heaven has sealed, they don't just face resistance, they face reversal. Their curses boomerang. Their gossip corrodes their own influence. Their manipulation backfires. Not because the chosen retaliated, but because the kingdom always defends its ambassadors. They thought they were clever, that their schemes were invisible. But everything done in secret concerning a chosen one echoes in the spirit realm like thunder. Every word spoken in hidden places is heard by the one who sees in secret, and judgment doesn't wait for applause. It comes like dew, unseen at first, but soaking everything in due time. This is not about revenge. This is about law, spiritual law, the kind of law that even angels are bound to obey. You cannot attempt to dismantle the mission of the chosen without triggering divine interruption. And so, their warfare has now turned inward. The energy they sent is ricocheting. Their own plans are now attacking their peace. Their own actions are now unraveling their lives. That is the unseen cost of spiritual trespass. What began as an act of control has ended in collapse. Because you can curse a man, you can slander a woman. But when you touch a vessel of God, the war doesn't stay in the natural. It escalates. It crosses realms. And what began as warfare quickly becomes self-destruction. Chosen ones are not just individuals, they are instruments. They saw you as a person, just a face, just a name. But in the realm of the Spirit, you are more than flesh and bone. You are an instrument, a conduit of divine will, a vessel carved not by man's hands, but by divine design. And when they tried to silence you, they didn't just attack a person. They attempted to muffle a frequency heaven was using to shift the atmosphere. You are not ordinary. You are not random. You are a message wrapped in skin, a response from heaven to a cry on the earth. That's why you've been through what you've been through. That's why the warfare has been relentless. Because the enemy doesn't attack noise. He attacks sound. The kind of sound that shakes systems and awakens sleeping hearts. When Moses rose up, he wasn't just delivering people. He was disrupting a structure. When Deborah spoke, it wasn't just prophecy, it was war strategy. When Christ entered a room, demons trembled, not because of his words alone, but because of what he carried. That's what you are. You carry a shift. You are a shift. So when they tried to destroy you, they weren't just trying to hurt you. They were trying to silence a move. But what they didn't understand is that heaven doesn't just use people. Heaven inhabits them. And anything inhabited by God cannot be undone by man. They failed to realize that your journey wasn't just about you. It was about every soul connected to your obedience, every life your survival would touch, every generation your healing would free. They saw a threat, but God saw a trumpet. And no matter how they tried to muffle your voice, the sound of your survival has already gone out into the earth. And now, no matter what they try, the assignment is active, the message is loose, and you, chosen one, are no longer just a vessel. You are a living declaration that what heaven ordains cannot be erased. Prophetic vision, the rise they never saw coming. They thought the pit would swallow you, that the heartbreak would silence you, that the shame would shrink you down into invisibility. But what they never accounted for, what they could never foresee, was that every stone they threw was laying the foundation of your rise. They imagined your story ending in defeat, but the same fire they lit to consume you became the flame that refined you. They thought they were burying your voice, your vision, your hope, but instead, they were planting the seed of your awakening. What they set in motion, heaven repurposed. And now, you rise, not in spite of the attack, but because of it. Every breakdown became an altar. Every rejection became a redirection. Every loss made room for something sacred to arrive. And somewhere between the betrayal and the becoming, you shed every false label they gave you. You stepped into the unshakable truth of who you are, not who they imagined, not who they needed you to be, but who you were always destined to become. You're no longer trying to convince them. That season is over. You are no longer asking for a seat at tables God never built for you. Now you build, you lead, you become. Because the rise is not just a comeback story, it's a prophetic unveiling, like Joseph rising from prisoner to ruler, like Esther shifting from orphan to queen, like Christ rising from death with keys in hand. You are becoming the very thing your enemies feared, and the very thing heaven always intended. And that's what makes this moment sacred. They aimed to destroy you, but only accelerated what they tried to delay. They lit a fire, but didn't realize it would make you shine. They stirred a storm, but didn't know it would lift your wings. This is the rise they never saw coming. The one their attacks built without knowing. The one their curses helped anoint. And now, your presence is a prophecy fulfilled, and your future is the part of the story they no longer get to control. So rise, chosen one, because every blow was secretly a trumpet, announcing your arrival. There's a mystery to being chosen, one that defies logic and disrupts expectations. It is not the loud, the well-connected, or the socially approved that heaven marks with divine oil. It is the outcast, the rejected, the one who kept walking when every voice said, "Turn back." What the world discards, God anoints, and what the enemy tries to destroy, God lifts up and uses as a signpost of His glory. The targeting was never a mistake. It was a reaction to the light you didn't know you were carrying, a reaction to a sound in your spirit that only heaven and hell could hear. And now, the very ones who aim to destroy your identity have become unwilling witnesses to your transformation. Not because you fought for revenge, but because you stood in reverence. This is the deeper mystery, that your life was never yours alone. It was a message, a movement, a manifestation of something greater. What they tried to break in you was actually a bridge for others. What they tried to silence in you was a sound generations needed to hear. And perhaps that is the paradox of the chosen. Your crushing was the prophecy. Your survival was the sermon. So what do we do with this revelation? Do we curse our enemies? No. We bless the God who let them reveal our strength. Do we replay the pain? No. We carry the oil that pain extracted. The only question that remains now is this: what will you do with the power that grew from the place of your greatest attack? Here is your prophetic seal. You are no longer hiding. You are no longer shrinking. You are no longer waiting for permission. You are chosen, marked, released. The rise they tried to prevent has already begun. If this message stirred something in your spirit, if it felt like it was speaking directly into your journey, help us keep these revelations flowing. Like this video, subscribe to Chosen One's Sanctuary, and share this with someone who needs to remember who they are. And in the comments below, tell us, what part of your story do you now see? Was never a wound, but a doorway? Let your voice be part of this unfolding movement. You are not alone in this rising. You are part of a remnant. And your testimony is the proof that heaven always finishes what it starts.